Bibliophiles of the Internet. My name is Adriana, and today I'm here to finally bring you my April wrap-up. Or should I say my Gaypril wrap-up, because the theme for this month, or my goal, was to read nothing but queer lit. The first book, funnily enough, was not in theme because it was a long-awaited request that finally came through at my library, and that was Chew Volume 10 by John Layman and Rob Guillory. I've talked about this comic series a ton. The main character is Tony Chew, and he is pseudopathic, which means that for everything he eats or tastes, he receives psychic impressions of everything that thing has been through. Which is both good and bad. Good because he's an FDA agent and often called upon to help piece together crime scenes. Bad because of the methods he has to use. As I always say, Chew is such a wonderful balance of dark and zaniness. It's really gritty, there's a lot of action and mystery, and it's kind of twisted, but at the same time, it's really hilarious, which kind of doesn't make sense, but also makes perfect sense. And I love how all the backgrounds of every panel are so full of great details, and the creators of this series never bypass the opportunity to make a joke, which I love. Also, I really feel like this volume took the series to the next level because all of the threads are slowly but surely coming together. You're starting to piece together the bigger picture, and you also get to see another side of Tony Chew that I feel like you haven't gotten to see before. You see how high the stakes are for him, what he's willing to risk, how far he's willing to go. So I really liked to see that character development. As I've said before, Chew is one of my favorite comic series of all time. I really enjoyed this installment and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then the first themed book I read for the month was Under the Lights by Dahlia Adler. This story is told in dual perspectives. One of those belongs to Josh Chester and the other one is Vanessa Park. They are both very young Hollywood actors who are at a very interesting time in their career. They're kind of famous, but they're not too famous, and they're both pondering what is their next career move. They want to know who they are or who they want to be or how they want to present themselves to the public. So the story really revolves around those kinds of issues. Vanessa's side of the story specifically is where we get the queer rep because she just got a new assistant / career handler named Brianna, who she's realizing she's very much attracted to. So she's trying to figure that out and also think about how and if she wants to present this to the public as a somewhat famous actress. What's really great about this story is that both characters are at a very interesting crossroads in their life, where yes, they are these somewhat famous Hollywood actors. Maybe they have a fan base, maybe they have money, but at the same time they have limited agency. So they might still live at home, or they're thinking about what their agent wants, what their publicist wants, what their fans want, or how they're being perceived in the media, etc., etc. So they're not exactly free to just do whatever they want without consequence or express themselves as they are. So they're still struggling to figure out who they are within those confines. That dynamic I feel was really well explored. I also really like the characters, the budding relationship between Vanessa and Brianna, the chemistry between them, how that relationship developed. I also really came to care about Josh, which was kind of surprising because I wrote him off from the very beginning, but he turned into this great character who, like I said, I actually really cared about. So overall, there were a lot of great things happening in this story, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Beautiful Music for Ugly Children by Kirsten Cron Mills. This story is about a trans boy named Gabe who has a radio show called Beautiful Music for Ugly Children, which is his escape. It's where he can be himself because on the air he can present himself as the person he's always known himself to be. He actually starts to gain somewhat of a fan base, but all of that threatens to come crashing down when some of his listeners claim that they quote-unquote know who he really is. I wanted to like this book, but as it turns out, I really didn't. First of all, this story is about a trans character, but it's written by a completely cis, completely straight author, and it's not that authors can't write outside of their lanes or their experiences, but when it's done very badly, it's really obvious. I just felt like Gabe was such a stereotypical trans character, like all of his characteristics and all of his thought processes were things that I feel like cis authors think that trans characters feel or things that they care about, but that may not be the case. And I also felt like a lot of this story defaulted to what I like to call queer tragedy, so a lot of the tension in the story revolves around those big dramatic events like death threats or assault or things like that, while it completely misses all of the microaggressions that Gabe would definitely experience on a day-to-day basis. I had so many more issues, but let's just say I don't recommend this book. I feel like it's very outdated. When it was first published in 2012, I'm sure it was groundbreaking, it was bold and daring and brave and all those great things. That's why it won the Stonewall Award. But I feel like now in 2016, we need better than this, we can do better than this, and we have better than this. So I would just say pass on this one if you have a chance. There was very little that I liked or believed or cared about in this book, and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. In better news, I then turned to some own voices and I read Santa Olivia by Jacqueline Carey. This story is set in this isolated military buffer zone between the United States and Mexico known as Santa Olivia, and that is where our main character Lou Garon was born and raised. Her father was actually a genetically modified weapon created by the government, and as it turns out, Lou has inherited all of his superhuman abilities. The citizens of Santa Olivia are in a very strange place because they don't belong to the US, they don't belong to Mexico, they don't belong anywhere really, and no one knows that they're there in the first place, so they're treated very badly by the occupying military forces, and their quality of life overall is very poor. So they need some kind of a hero, they need someone in their corner, they need someone to bring them hope again, and so Lou takes it upon herself to become a vigilante hero. In case you missed all of that, this story is about a non-white lesbian werewolf superhero. Like, yes. I'm really having trouble condensing my thoughts on this book because it was so good, it was so amazing, it was everything I needed, everything I ever wanted. I was just obsessing over this book for the entire time I was reading it, and I just want other people to also read it. I don't have a lot to say about this volume because I just love everything about Lumberjanes. It's hilarious, the story is original and zany, I love the dynamics of the friendship and this fantastic group that you get to know over the course of the series. And to top it all off, this volume had raptors. Like, if you have something awesome and you want to make it even more awesome, throw in some raptors. That's my theory. Of course, this volume was incredible and it had velociraptors, so I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read volume 1 of Number 6 by Atsuko Asano. This is like a mixture of sci-fi and queer lit. The main character Shion lives in this utopian metropolis called Number 6, but then suddenly people start dying mysteriously and the city is trying to cover it up, and Shion also finds himself associated with a wanted criminal, so he finds himself on the run and he just wants to figure out what is happening in Number 6. It's hard to explain because I really like this series, but I don't love it, and I think it translates better as an anime as opposed to a manga series. I feel like the anime series goes more in depth and allows the emotions of the characters to come through much more strongly, but it's also kind of just a weird story to piece together in general, so I'm still not sure how I feel about it. Overall, I don't know if I will continue on with the manga series, but I really enjoy the anime series, which I've been watching and I'm very nearly done with, but overall I gave this first volume 3.5 out of 5 stars. Let's see if I can squeeze in this last book before my battery dies, but the last thing I read for Gapril was Openly Straight by Bill Konigsberg. This is Own Voices. It's about a boy named Raph who just transferred to like an all-boys school, and he's trying to reinvent himself there because he's tired of being known as just the gay guy. So he decides to do this experiment where he's not disclosing his identity to anyone and he's just trying to be himself, whoever that is. But it kind of backfires on him when he starts to fall for this guy named Ben, and he can't exactly tell him how he feels. First of all, this book is very funny, very engaging. I really connected with the sense of humor and the narrative style, so there was that. But also, I really like that this was a discussion of privilege and labels, how they can feel confining or like stereotypes, but at the same time, they can bring us a sense of validity or clarity. So it's very paradoxical, it's very confusing, it's a really difficult line to walk, and it kind of boils down to who you are and your circumstances. I do wish I got to see Roth grapple a little bit more with the consequences of his experiment, with the questions and the problems and the issues it brought up a little bit more concretely, and ultimately I didn't completely agree with some of the conclusions he came to, but this was still a really great book that I really enjoyed reading, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books I read in April. Of course, I would love to hear from you if you have read any of the books I mentioned in this video, or if you have any recommendations for queer lit I should read in the future. But that is everything I had for this wrap-up video today. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.